I'm Sarah Cohen. I'm the pro bono attorney at Sherman and Sterling. I think we do about 20 asylum cases a year. So we get emails from groups like Human Rights First or Sanctuary for Families. So this email gave us a little description of the case. This case involves a mother, 3 daughters, and her 2 nieces who are fleeing from a West African country. So I read this. Then I go ahead, circulate an email to all the attorneys. Very often it's picked up by someone based on the client's nationality and their language. So I think I probably circulated it at about 9 o'clock at night and got a response pretty much right away from a brand new first year. She sent it from her BlackBerry. It was 10:02 p.m. We treat pro bono like any other matter at the firm. People work here around the clock anyway, so whether they're doing the pro bono at 11 a.m. or 2 a.m., it kind of just mixes in with their other work.
Good evening, Covington and Burling.
Human Rights First found a pair of lawyers to represent H from the New York firm Covington and Burling. He met them in February of 2006, 3 months after he arrived in the U.S.
My first meeting was, not so comfortable for me. I thought that the classical lawyers with the cold eyes, without any emotions.
I think both of our first impressions were that our client doesn't look like his picture, not smiling. And in real life, our client his default is to smile.
David Pinsky and his colleague Olivia Radin do civil litigation and white-collar criminal defense work at the firm. Radin has taken on some pro bono asylum cases before. This is Pinsky's first. He was particularly interested in H because his own family is from the former Soviet Union, so they can speak Russian together, and this puts H at ease.
When you feel yourself comfortable like friends with the lawyers, it's a great thing. It helped me to survive.
It helps for asylum seekers to feel comfortable with their lawyers. They have to provide as much detail as possible about what happened to them, and it can be a painful process telling it to anyone, much less to lawyers they just met. This man from Liberia was represented by Karen Tal and Elena Tsaneva from Davis Polk and Wardwell in New York.
Going through the asylum process is like doing a surgical operation without anesthesia. Every time I got to tell my story over, I got to go through the pains. Most of the time they had to drag it out, to be honest with you. They had to drag it out.
We knew that what we saw in his affidavit is not the whole story. So what we basically try to do first is explain to our client that we're not the government, we're not the asylum officers. We're on the same side.
I figured that if I wanted to help my own case, I had to be open with them and tell them everything.
The lawyers shape the stories into legal arguments to convince an asylum officer or an immigration judge that their client meets the legal requirements for asylum. The criteria are written into international and U.S. law. A person has to have a well-founded fear that they will be persecuted because of their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group.
I'm from Burma, the military government. They arrested me for meeting with Aung San Suu Kyi. She is the pro-democracy leader for Burma. They are especially afraid because I'm very young and then I'm a student. They are afraid that something big will happen directed by me, so they punish me quite severely.
This woman succeeded in proving that she was persecuted because of her political opinion. An asylum seeker has to show that he or she was persecuted specifically because of one of the 5 grounds. It's not always easy to prove, though. Mark Hetfeld gives an example of a religious case where defining religious practices can get complicated.
In China, there's the official Catholic Church and there's the unofficial Catholic Church. The official Catholic Church is really part of the Chinese state bureaucracy. Certain religious teachings are actually illegal in China. For example, the virgin birth as well as the Immaculate Conception are both regarded as being superstitions. Many of the members of the unofficial Catholic Church where the Church has allegiance to the Pope and to the Vatican. The members got their education in the official Catholic Church, so they may not be that well versed in the facts because it wasn't really taught to them. So an asylum adjudicator might say, well, everybody knows who's Catholic, what the virgin birth is. If you ask somebody that question and they don't know, in China, for example, there's a very good reason for it.
At the Covington and Burling law firm, H and his lawyers are preparing the asylum application.
The most important thing that we do is preparing a strong factual case. It's really hammering out all these little details.
Some of the witnesses who we'd like to get to corroborate the story are still in the former Soviet Union. Our biggest problem is security. We're worried about emails being monitored. We're worrying about telephone calls being monitored. Right now, I'm pretty optimistic. There's always the concern that something unforeseen could happen. You hear stories about people being designated as being some sort of security risk to the United States in the context of the war on terror. And stories like that kind of scare you.
Immigration law is constantly being changed and reworked. Asylum was affected by the Patriot Act passed after 9/11, and then again in April 2005 by the Real ID Act. And these days, asylum advocates are concerned about a legal concept called material support.
Essentially, anyone who has given any kind of support to any kind of a group that uses armed weapons is considered to have given material support to a terrorist organization, even if under duress or fear for their life. Ironically, people who are actually the victims of terrorists are being excluded from refugee protection based on these incredibly expansive definitions.
A major material support case is that of a Burmese woman who was detained for 2 years in El Paso, Texas, while her case made its way through the courts. Judges had accepted that her claim for asylum was credible, but the sticking point was that she had donated money to a Chin organization that has an armed wing.
She cannot be given asylum because by giving some donations to that group, she has provided material support to a terrorist organization. And the group, of course, has not been categorized as a terrorist organization by the U.S. State Department. In fact, the U.S. State Department has repeatedly condemned the Burmese government for its treatment of religious and ethnic minorities, such as the Chin.
You're listening to American Purgatory, Political Asylum in the Age of Terrorism. We'll be back in a minute.